So I've been working on my new Serum 2 preset pack, and I just made this 808 sound. And I wanted to show you guys exactly how I did it, because I think that every preset pack should have a good old 808 in it. Let's get right into it. Let's start off with a fresh new Serum 2 preset, and just start it from scratch, and then we can open my preset that I made to take a look at the effects. So any good 808 starts with a sine wave, and you can just start with the default shapes here and just move the wavetable position to 2 to get this sine wave over here. And I'm just going to drop the octave to -2, so that way I have a nice low C whenever I press C3. The next thing that I'm going to immediately do is shape my envelope. So I'm just going to pull it down like this, and then yeah, I guess I'll leave it a bit of a curve here. So this envelope right here is going to create the shape for your 808. So if you want it to be super steep, you can make it steep like this, and it's going to decay very quickly. If you make it more linear like this, it's going to decay slower. I personally like mine to have a little bit of a curve. I think that's pretty good. So immediately you can hear that an 808 is coming along pretty nicely, although it's still basic, and it's definitely missing that initial punch or transient. And the best way that we can create that is by going to LFO1 here and just pulling this dot all the way to the left, and then pulling this dot in the middle all the way down. And that way you create this really sharp transient here. Set it to envelope mode so it doesn't repeat, and then open up the matrix tab and just drag the LFO1 to this first slot here. Then go to the destination, go to global, main tuning, and set the amount to about 20. I think that's a good starting point. And immediately you'll hear that knock now. Let's exaggerate it so that you guys can really hear that. Now obviously we don't want it that much, so let's pull it down. I think 19 or 20% works well. It's definitely more impactful now. So that's pretty much 80 to 90% of the sound of your 808. Just a sine wave, shaping the sine wave, and then adding that transient attack. So this is a very clean 808, and everything that you add on from here is going to add color to your 808. It's going to add both color and texture, and we can do that in a couple of different ways. The main one being distortion. So you can go over here and add, let's say, diode 2. We'll pull the drive up, and immediately we have distortion and more texture. Now that's a very aggressive sounding 808. If you want to tame it, it's a good idea to put a filter on. Go to MG low 12 and set the cutoff to about 300 Hertz. That way we still have that distortion, it's just not as aggressive. And from here you can add as many distortions as you want. You can even try experimenting with adding a couple of distortion types, as I did in my preset. That's going to give you a lot of texture in your 808s. Another way to make your 808s more interesting is to incorporate another oscillator. So let's just engage Oscillator B. Let's go to digital. Let's go with Reese. Why not? I'm going to turn this all the way up to 16, detune it a little bit, pull the octave down 1. So now this oscillator isn't playing an octave above Oscillator A. And let's see what that sounds like. So now we have a wider 808 sound, and I can show you what it's doing exactly on an imager. So let's turn Oscillator B off. Let's go to an imager. With Oscillator A alone, it sounds like this. You can see it's a very mono sound, but now if we turn Oscillator B on, we have a massively wide 808. Play around with how wide you want it by changing both the level and the detune amount. It's also a good idea in many cases to hit this little mono button here. What we'll also do is we'll go to the filter, engage the filter for A and B, why not? And then set this to, let's say, to about 1 or 2K, maybe less. Let's do 700. So now we've tamed some of those high frequencies coming out of Oscillator B. And now we have a wide 808. So those are just 2 examples of how you can create texture with your 808s. And that's really where the identity and the sound of the 808 comes from the most. because at its core, like we said, an 808 is pretty much just a sine wave shaped by an envelope, and then you can of course incorporate this global pitch modulation. Serum 2 has a couple of different ways to incorporate pitch modulation. You can do it on the master tuning, just like we did. You can also do it on the oscillator itself, on the coarse tuning, for example. You could assign LFO1 to the coarse tuning, but then things can get a little bit hairy if you start adding different oscillators and you forget to assign it all to the same coarse tuning. So I just find it easier to use the master tuning, and that way I don't have to worry about forgetting to assign the LFO to the multiple coarse tunings. So I think that just about covers the basics. So let's dive into my preset that I just made and see what I did there. So you can see everything is exactly the same. You're welcome to copy these exact settings. The sine wave is the same one from the default shapes. Reese is set to 16. The detune is at 0.04. You're welcome to copy the envelope settings. LFO1 is exactly the same. It's assigned to the main tuning. And MGLO 12 is the filter. It's assigned for Oscillator B. And the cutoff is at 5,662 Hertz. So let's just dive into the effects. So you can copy them exactly the same if you'd like to just copy this exact preset. So I've got two distortions going on. The first one is a diode 2. The filter is off. The drive is set to 60% and the mix is set to 64%. So let's hear what that sounds like just with the first distortion. So that's adding that initial transient distortion, if you like. You see it doesn't hold for very long. It just holds for the transient. So I thought that's great, but maybe I want another distortion that's going to hold for a little longer. And so I added this asymmetrical distortion with the drive at 100% and the mix is set lower at 28%. And you can hear that with the second distortion added, it holds on through almost the entire 808. And that's great because it colors the whole thing. Next up, we've got chorus, and we don't hear it now because I've mapped the mix to macro number 5. So let's turn macro number 5 up. That's pretty self-explanatory. Bit of chorus is always fun. Next up, we've got compression to glue the whole thing together. So on single mode, lowered the threshold to about 20 dB, negative 20 dB. Ratio is at 4:1, bit of makeup gain, and I've made the release longer so that it holds through more of the 808. It's set to 484.8 milliseconds. Just tightens it up real nice. Next we've got a filter, but it's a special filter. It's set to sample and hold. You can find that under miscellaneous, sample hold. The cutoff is at 472 Hertz. Got the drive up a tiny bit, and again the macro is mapped to macro number 3. I should say this mix knob is mapped to macro number 3. So let's see what that sounds like all the way up. Oof, got that nasty digital distortion going on. So that at small amounts adds a cool, nice digital distortion. That's for some hardcore music. So let's turn that all the way down. Second to last, we have another filter, and this is your classic filter. It's set to MGLO 12. Classic low pass filter. Cutoff is set to 63 Hertz. And an interesting thing that I did in this preset is I mapped LFO1 as well to the cutoff of the filter cutoff frequency. So that's adding a slight knock or motion. It's very subtle, but I think it adds something cool. Makes it knock even a little bit more, gives it a little bit more motion. And this filter just tames everything. You'll see here I mapped the cutoff frequency to macro number 2 over here. So if we raise it, it'll just open the entire filter up. Which is pretty dandy, because then you can automate that throughout your track to make it interesting. And finally here we have a convolve. I've got it set to short digital gated preset. And again, I've mapped the mix knob over here to the last macro. So let's see what it sounds like all the way up. So it's adding a nice little bit of space. Again, this is something that I would typically automate throughout the track, maybe on specific hits. I think it's nice to have a little bit of a short room reverb if you're playing higher notes occasionally, maybe like this. And then when it goes down to the lower ones, you can turn it off so that you get a completely focused sound. But why not include a little bit of width?
Quick pause, if you want better sounds, I just dropped a bunch of free sound kits. I've got my Radix free drum kit,
Tech House Serum 2 presets, Afro House kicks, a Prophet 5V guide, and finally our Serum 2 Voyager preset pack. You can grab those for absolutely free from the link down below. Lastly, we have this glide knob, which is just mapped to the portamento over here. The max is set to 50%, so regularly, if you go like this, there's no glide, but if I turn it all the way up, you have that nice glide going on. I also left out another important thing. Macros number 1 and 7 are the decay and the release. So for the decay, this is gonna affect the decay time of envelope 1. So if I turn it all the way down, it's very short. If I turn it all the way up, you can hear how long that sustains for. I think the middle is a good medium. And the release time is mapped simply to the release of envelope 1. At its smallest position, it's 10 milliseconds. So it's gone as soon as I start pressing the key. However, if I turn this knob up, you still hear it when I release the key. I find having decay and release knobs a small but important detail, especially when you're making 808s in a synthesis setting like this. Because why not? You know, you want to be able to fit the 808 to your track ideally. Some tracks are faster, so you might need a shorter decay and release time, and some tracks are slower. If you're working at a track, for example, that's 65 or 70 beats per minute, you might want that 808 to ring out a little bit. But if your track is really fast, it might be very convenient to be able to just tuck that decay time in. And that way you don't have to worry about manually chopping the 808, which you can always do, but it's just another step. And I'd personally rather have an option like this within the macros, within the preset itself, to just dial it in with my track to hear how it sounds best. So now I think we finally covered everything. And yeah, so again, pretty basic stuff, but I wanted to share with you a couple of important details that I think are really helpful when creating an 808 preset. Things like the decay, the release, the inclusion of a secondary oscillator, the inclusion of multiple distortion units, compression. Yeah, it's all pretty simple, but it adds up. If you'd like a completely different texture, you can always mute as many effects as you like, and then use third-party plugins, for example, like third-party distortion, to get a totally different texture for your 808s. Because in Serum 2, as great as it is, you're limited to these types of distortions. And if none of them suit your 808, you're welcome to use a third-party plugin to try and craft that sound. So I think that'll do it for this video. Hopefully I explained everything well. Yeah, hopefully you picked up a thing or two, either when designing 808 presets or things that you can maybe incorporate in your own 808 presets in the future. Let me know what you thought of it. Let me know if I missed anything. Let me know if I explained something incorrectly. I'm getting in the groove of making these videos every week. Thank you guys very much for sticking around. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, I really, really, really appreciate it. I can't tell you how much it means to me whenever I see your nice comments. It literally keeps me going on. No more rambling. I'll see you guys next week with another awesome sound design video. And let me know what you think in the comments below. Have a good night. Thanks for sticking around.